Hey everyone, my name is Sara Harberson. I am America's college counselor. It's good to be back here again for another Facebook Live. We are heading to the end of the school year for most students, so that tends to bring up a lot of questions no matter what year of high school you or your child is in. I would love to hear from you as always. Let me know what state you're coming from, if you are a parent or a student, what year of high school you're in, and obviously I'll be excited to get some questions from all of you. This is a busy time of year, as I mentioned, AP exams, finals, students taking the SAT, ACT. We've got families planning their trips to colleges. We've got high school seniors still getting off the wait list from a few colleges out there, and a lot of high school juniors trying to finalize their college list, and freshmen and sophomores with a lot of questions ranging from what to take next year to what to be doing this coming summer. So I'll be excited to see what is on your minds. I should mention my new blog post will be out tomorrow. And if you're looking for more ideas for what to do this summer, it will be about that. So definitely check it out. But I think we can probably get started. I see a bunch of questions already coming in. And I want to try to answer as many as we can during our time together. Why don't we start with this one? All right. Hi, Sarah. My son is finishing up his freshman year of high school. He has now completed 3 years of high school Spanish, 1 this year and 2 years in junior high. He is a BC student in Spanish and does not like it. I have 2 questions. Should he cut his losses now and stop taking Spanish to protect his GPA as much as he can, despite your general 5.4 recommendation? And 2, he has the option to convert the junior high Spanish grades B's and C's to pass-fail on his high school transcript. Should he do that? Okay. So yes, this mom is referring to my 5-4 plan, which encourages students for any college that they're applying to try to take, if possible, all 5 core subjects for all 4 years of high school. The 5 core subjects include English, math, science, history or social studies, and foreign language. So I get this question a lot. So if the student has taken foreign language in middle school, they could be starting freshman year of high school in sometimes Spanish 2 or French 2, for example. If you're looking at highly selected colleges, they will expect you to continue taking that foreign language, ideally through senior year, because you're going to be able to get to that AP level. And most colleges will assume that you had a foreign language in middle school, but ultimately they want to ideally see the student take those foreign language classes from 9th grade on. So some colleges that might have a higher acceptance rate might be a lot more generous with what years of foreign language they will consider. And if it's listed on his transcript, the middle school foreign language classes, he might be okay. But I would say at the very least, I would probably try to take Spanish for 10th grade with a tutor and with a lot of support, and then consider possibly not taking it after 10th grade if the student is really, really struggling. But you will generally see that colleges like to see at a minimum of 3 years of foreign language in high school. Some even want to see it for all 4 years. And some colleges will give you credit for what you took in middle school, but the more selective ones are really going to expect to see foreign language in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, regardless of whether or not the student took it in middle school. Next question. What makes you a better college counselor than the independent school college guidance counselor? Why should a family hire Sarah if we have one at school? Okay, let me take that one first. Okay. What makes me a better college counselor? Well, this is the only thing that I've done for my entire professional career, except for a year as an assistant at a very big law firm in Philadelphia. 1 year of law school, I dropped out to take my first admissions job. But since the late 1990s, I've been working in college admissions. I was an entry-level admissions officer. an associate dean of admissions at an Ivy League institution. I was a dean of admissions and financial aid at a small liberal arts college. I've been the director of college counseling at a high school, and I've worked with thousands of students. I've read hundreds of thousands of essays and letters of recommendations and applications. And so I really do have my pulse on this industry, both from the college side of the process and the high school side of the process. But I'm also a mom of 3 kids. So I'm approaching this process as a student and as a parent. But I like families to think of themselves almost like admissions officers, because if you think of yourself as a parent or a student going through this process for the first time, you sometimes don't see the bigger picture. So especially in Application Nation and all of my Application Nation groups, I teach parents and students to think like admissions officers who have been doing this thousands, millions of times. And that is a great way to approach the admissions process, even if this is the first time that the family is going through the process. So why should you hire me? For those reasons. I've got the resume, but in the end, I care deeply about students. I am a student advocate. I don't work for the colleges. I don't work for high schools. I don't work for anyone. I work for myself, and I work for the students that I work with. So I care deeply about the students every single step of the process. And I'm going to be honest. I mean, I am meticulous with everything that I do in the admissions process. So when I'm working with student and family, I want them to understand the ins and outs of every single question on that application and every part of the process. So, but you have to feel comfortable and trust me most of all. And if you do, I hope you'll join Application Nation. All right, next question. What are the T50 admissions officers like to see if a student just can't get an A in honors or AP? Would a B in an AP or honors class be better than an A in a regular class? Generally speaking, yes. For the more selective colleges, they do expect the student to be taking the most challenging classes, ideally in all 5 core subjects. Getting A's or close to that in all of those core subjects is definitely going to make a student more competitive. But this question actually just came up in our Application Nation Class of 2023 Zoom call tonight. I said, it's okay, you can get a B's and still get into a highly selected college, but you're not going to have as much success if you have a lot of B's on your record if you're applying to those elite colleges that have super low acceptance rates. And then finally, would you share the stats of your students who got accepted to T50 schools without knowing the stats, but only show acceptance to top school names and scholarships are not helping? I would say if you want to get a sense of what colleges our Application Nation students are getting admitted to, I would definitely encourage families to follow me on Instagram. My Instagram story is usually filled, depending on the time of year, but a lot of the year is filled with where our students are getting accepted and where they're getting merit scholarships. We also share a lot of internal data with our families in Application Nation, so they have a really good sense of what works and how much merit money institutions give out to our students. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking about Application Nation, you're going to get all the information that you see on my public platforms, but then all the inside scoop as well. Okay, next question. My daughter wants to major in history. She has picked all 5 core courses for grade 12, excellent. And now she's deciding the elective and not sure whether she should choose AP Economics, Micro, or AP United States Government and Politics. What's your opinion on this? So I always tell students, if they have a sense of what their major is going to be, or which major they're going to list on their application, I should say, because it can change once they get to college, then I encourage them to build up as much evidence for that major choice as possible. And the best way to start building up that evidence is to take the most challenging classes in that subject matter and to do well in those classes in high school. So for a student who wants to major in history, they're probably taking maybe AP US History their junior year or AP World History. But either one of those other AP social sciences is going to work. Either it's AP economics, whether it's micro or macro, or AP government. I would just make sure that both of those offerings at her high school are going to be year-long classes. If it's just a semester and you're not on block scheduling, then that would only be fulfilling kind of a half year. That being said, if she's already taking a history class as part of her 5-4 plan, she should be okay, because that would, even if it's just an extra semester of a social studies or a social science, would be fine. And I would say both those classes, AP Micro and AP US Government, are probably looked at equally by most admissions officers. Okay, hello, thank you for everything that you do. My son will be a senior in high school next year. He's interested in applying as a business major. During the summer, he's planning to take an internship at a dentist's office. Well, working at a dentist's office show confusing interest. He's eventually planning on becoming a dentist. Okay, this is a good question. I talk a lot about students interested in business because it's super, super competitive right now, especially for male students applying for business programs and also majority male applicants. And I define majority students in the applicant pool as usually students who are coming from, who are self-identify as white or Asian, who are coming from college-educated families. And if you're coming from overrepresented states in the country in an applicant pool, that can make things more difficult. So I always say for any type of student, you want to have a really distinctive soundbite, but I would think if you are a male student, a majority male student applying to business, you really have to have an angle. So if he's going to be doing an internship at a dentist's office, he could really study some business angle to the field of dentistry. And I would encourage him to explore that as much as possible with his mentors in the dentist's office. And the other thing is, and here's a little secret that you get in Application Nation, you know, it's one thing to do something really interesting, right? It's another thing to present it in a way that's going to translate to the person on the receiving end. So if he is seeing some business aspects of medicine or dentistry in his internship, I want him to be able to translate that and project that and present that when he is listing that activity on his activity section. Now in Application Nation, I do a whole Zoom call on that, but it's really important. I even have a blog on it. You can check it out. Again, sure, it's important what you're doing, but it's how you're presenting that in your application, because the admissions officers could look at that activity listing and go, I'm confused. I thought this student's applying to our undergraduate business program, or they could say, oh, this student is interested in the business aspects of healthcare or the business aspects of dentistry, for example. So as long as he presents that when he's listing that activity, it can go a long way. All right, next question. My freshman son might end up with a C this semester in honors algebra. He's going to take the class again over the summer. Will admissions officers look at both grades or combined? Okay, here's the thing. A C happens for a lot of students, and sometimes even lower than that. It's not the end of the world, and the fact is, this is freshman year, and so we have to give students some grace, and I think admissions officers in colleges need to give students some grace. I would say that you want to ask the school counselor, his school counselor or guidance counselor, an important question. You want to ask them, what appears on the official transcript? Is it my child's final year grades and that's it? Is it semester 1, semester 2, and the final grade? Is it each marking period? Because your son might be going to a high school that only includes final year grades. And if he got one semester C or one marking period C, it may not even show up on the official transcript. And if that's the case and he ends up in the B range, I really would not want him to retake the class over the summer. But if it is a C or a lower grade, some students will consider taking the class over in the summer. You, again, want to talk to the school counselor or your son's guidance counselor to find out how the transcript is reflected. Does the summer class grade end up becoming the actual grade, or are both listed on the transcript. You want to have a sense of what's listed on the transcript and how that's going to factor into the overall GPA and the class rank if class rank is available. So definitely talk to your child's school counselor, because what's reflected on the transcript is really going to drive that decision about, number one, if colleges are even going to see that C, and number two, if he should retake the class in the summertime. All right, next question. My junior year son was just awarded the Yale Book Award and the University of Rochester Balch and Loam Science Award. Whoa, those are two big end-of-year awards for juniors. Should he list these on his college applications? I've read some mixed information on the subject based on the fact that these awards are teacher-nominated and not based on a contest or for a very specific achievement. Okay, here's the thing. That's why you're here. That's why I get to answer questions like this and give you the straight answer. These book awards are highly respected by every college in the country, not just the college that the book award is attached to every college. And here's the reason why. Because the faculty choose these students very carefully. Remember, I was on the high school side at one point in my career. I was in that meeting where the entire faculty get together towards the end of the school year, and we were voting on who was getting these book awards. And the faculty were picking not just the smartest students in the class, but the kindest and most generous students as well. So getting one of those book awards or two of those big awards are huge for your son, and I would absolutely want him to list them on his honors section of his application. So it doesn't, it's not going to hurt him in the admissions process. It can only strengthen his application. Okay. Next question. Would you ask a teacher for a recommendation that is known not to spend much time on letters where a student did well, or a teacher where a student had to put a lot of effort and didn't do as well? This is for math, science recommendation. A student will be a STEM major. She has great choices for English and history. This is really hard. You know, couple of things. When you are thinking about which teachers to ask for letters of recommendation, first and foremost, you should stick with the teachers that you did your best in, so your strongest grades. Also, added bonus, if that teacher knows you well and you've had conversations in and out of class. And in an ideal world, that teacher is teaching you a subject matter that matches up with your major choice if possible. But if not, try to ask a junior teacher that fulfills some of those other things. If you know that a teacher does not write a really detailed letter of recommendation, I would not ask them. Those are really unhelpful. If they're just kind of repeating all the information that's already in your application, like your activities and your GPA, that's information that's already in your application. Admissions officers desperately want letters of recommendation where the teacher's actually going to talk about the student and their impressions of the student as a student in their classroom and in the community, and they want specific details. Those are the best letters of recommendation. So it would be great if the student is going to be applying as a STEM major. It would be great to have at least one of the letters come from a math or science teacher. And if you can't find that perfect teacher from junior year, I would probably rely on a sophomore year teacher. But in the end, if a STEM teacher is writing you a letter because that's your junior year teacher and that's the option you have, but isn't writing a detailed letter, it's not going to help tremendously. So I would always go first and foremost with junior year teachers, classes you've done well in, and where the teacher is going to write a pretty strong one. And if you're ever curious, look at the comments that your teacher writes on your papers or your tests, or at the end of the marking period. Especially if you go to a private high school, almost always the teacher's going to be writing some kind of comments, some type of comment on you. And so you can tell a lot about how good of a writer they are and how much they think of you by looking at those comments. Next question. How do we approach a teacher's brag sheet that asks for a list of activities for the letter of recommendation to avoid any overlap with Common App, large, public, competitive, high school, and teacher will not meet with students to discuss letter of recommendation. Appreciate your thoughts. Thank you. We are part of AN 2023, but sent our question in towards the end of our session. Thanks so much for asking it here. I think this is an important one, and this is one that comes up a lot in our group on the discussion board, and I think a lot of you have the same question. If you know my approach, I want every piece of a student's application to show another dimension of the student. And when a teacher says, please fill out a brag sheet for me if you want me to write a letter of recommendation, I get really worried because those brag sheets are really basic templates, and they're most of the time, or a lot of the time, asking the student to list what activities they do, what's the most meaningful activity, things like that, or, describe themselves in 5 adjectives. These are really useless questions. And if the student is filling out one brag sheet and that's being sent to the counselor who's writing the letter of recommendation and 2 teachers, that just means that they're gonna bring up the same thing again and again and again. So ideally, you want to try to avoid those questions about activities, about weaknesses, about challenges, about adjectives, because these do not translate well in letters of recommendation. Another idea would be to leave those blank and just indicate to the teacher that you would like to talk about the special things that came up or the best moments of the class or the year in a meeting with them. If they're not willing to meet with you, I would put some things in writing. You should be explaining why you chose that specific teacher. You should mention highlights for you as a student in that school year, whether it was a unit you studied, whether it was an assignment, a paper, a project. Mention it and get specific, because teachers sometimes forget all the cool things that you did in terms of your papers and projects. You can mention conversations that you've had with that teacher in and out of class. And you can mention any interactions or observations you have of that teacher, that subject matter, and why it was so special for you. So providing that kind of anecdotal information can be really helpful to the teacher. It can jog their memory. And in some cases, they will even paraphrase your own words and put that in the letter of recommendation. So that would be my recommendation. And Suzanne, I can definitely give you some more details on the discussion board when we have a little bit more time. Probably I'll be on the board again in the morning, so I can definitely give you more details if you want. All right, next question. My daughter is a straight A student, honors and AP student. She scored a 31 on the ACT. How do we decide which colleges to submit scores to? Great question. Wow. Okay. So what I want students to do, and they can do that right now. If they're a junior, they're finishing up junior year, they can check this out now. But I also want them to revisit this at the end of the summer or early fall. I want them to go straight to the college's admissions website, and hopefully the college provides information on their most recent freshman class. I can tell you right now that if a college has their most recent freshman class profile on their website, it's from last year's class, so the group of students that just finished freshman year. So that information is already about a year old. So you can look at that to get a sense, and there's usually a middle 50% range for SAT and ACT scores on that admissions website. But I don't want you to just say, okay, I checked it out once at the end of junior year. I need you to go back to that admissions website at the end of the summer or the beginning of the fall, because that's usually when the admissions office is going to be updating that school profile and providing you with the most recent, truly the most recent class. So the class of 2022, graduating high school 2022 would be graduating college 2026. You want to be looking for that college's class of 2026 profile for the acceptance rate, to determine if that college is still within reach for you, and also to look at the middle 50% range or average SAT and ACT scores. That's probably the best approach to do it. I would say if the student has a really strong transcript, like straight A's, has taken every AP and honors class, and wants to apply to some highly selected colleges, you probably want your ACT to be at least a 34, I would say, or a 1500 on your SAT. Higher the better if you want to be super, super competitive. So that tells me that if the college is test optional, that student, unless they take the ACT again or take the SAT and do better, my guess is that that student's transcript is going to be stronger than their test scores. And you never want to submit anything like a test score, especially if it's optional, if it's going to weaken your overall application. So that student might retake the ACT or take the SAT, but we definitely want to check out the new admissions or updated information on the admissions website towards the end of the summer, early fall, to know for sure. Next question, my daughter is dyslexic. She has great grades, but average ACT scores. Is dyslexia something we should disclose in the application process? Personally, I don't think most students that have a learning difference need to disclose that in their application. A lot of the students that have learning differences have 504 plans and have accommodations and have made natural adjustments to do well in their classes. And so someone looking at, an admissions officer looking at the student's transcript probably wouldn't even be able to tell that they have a learning difference. So it's my belief that it's personal information. And I worry sometimes, especially among the more selective colleges, that they will use that learning difference against the student in the admissions process. Yes, it's illegal, but I can't tell you how many things go wrong in the admissions process and how many times admissions offices are not being fair. So if the student has done incredibly well, I would just apply to test optional colleges, don't report scores, and it is my belief it's none of their business if you have a learning difference, especially for a student who has done incredibly well in high school. Next question, is it appropriate to give gift cards to the teachers and counselors who write your letters of recommendation? We get this question in Application Nation, especially in the fall. It's totally a personal choice. As someone who wrote tons of letters of recommendation as a director of college counseling at a high school, frankly, I did not expect anything. If you love what you do, you don't need a gift from a student, but I would say that the things that I got from students that meant the most, I still remember I had an artist, and she created this beautiful card, and she meticulously designed this beautiful card and wrote a beautiful note to me thanking me for everything to help her in the admissions process. And I had another student who gave me a paperweight with my name on it, and I'm still in contact with that student. She was actually featured in my book, SOUNDBITE, and she just got into medical school, so I'm really, really proud of her. But I don't think you need to, but nowadays that seems to be what a lot of families are doing. I would say I've been hearing from families in Application Nation that they give like a Starbucks card is a common gift, but that's what I'm hearing. But again, these teachers and counselors, they don't usually expect anything. So if you write them a nice note, if you make some baked goods for them or something small, I think will go a long way. All right, next question. My son has been asked to be a TA for math students next year. This is considered an independent study, although he doesn't need the credit. How best does he show this on his application? He is the only rising senior who is asked. Yeah, if you're being asked to be a TA as a high school student, you are usually highly respected by the faculty. So a couple of things. Generally, if the TA position or class that the student is being a TA in is going to be listed on the transcript, I would not list it as an activity in your activities list. I would pick one or the other. If it's listed on the transcript, I would definitely think about your letter writers. It's very possible that the teacher that asked the student to be a TA is already going to be writing one of their letters of recommendation, and that would be an important thing that you'd want the teacher to mention. So when you're filling out that brag sheet or sending a thank you email to the teacher who agreed to write your letter of recommendation, you can say, is it possible for you to comment on why you picked me as a TA and what your experience has been like with me being a TA for your class? That would be really helpful for that teacher to include in the letter of recommendation. If that teacher is not going to be writing one of your letters of recommendation, I would definitely ask your counselor of record to expand on it, contextualize it. In this case, this is the only student in the class or the senior class to be a TA. It'd be really nice for the school counselor to mention that. But if it's not going to be listed on the transcript, that is an opening, that's an opportunity for the student to list it as an activity, and you can actually put all that context in the description of the activity listing. But bravo for that, that's a really nice honor. Are potentially recruited athletes given leeway in the admissions process for highly selected colleges? Well, you asked the right person, Sherry. When I worked at Penn, I handled all of the recruited athletes. So I did pre-reads on all the recruited athletes, or a lot of them in the summer. Not all the recruited athletes get a pre-read, but most of them do. And I also reviewed every recruited athlete's application, and I chaired the athletics committee when I was at Penn. So here's the thing about recruited athletes. At almost every college, whether it's Division I, Division II, Division III, no matter how good or bad the team is, almost always, if the student is getting support from the collegiate coach for that college's team, almost always there is going to be some leeway. So the student who's applying to a highly selected college, if they are a recruited athlete for that highly selected college, you will sometimes see students get admitted who don't have as high of a test score as a non-recruited athlete. Their curriculum might be really strong, but maybe they haven't taken every single advanced level class that they could take at their high school. Their grades are good, but they're not perfect or near perfect. So there is going to be some leeway or some wiggle room. But it really depends on the institution. And I've had recruited athletes, hear from coaches that basically they have no influence in the admissions process or a lot of influence. And we see this play out in the admissions process. What I've seen, especially if you were a recruited athlete at MIT, you gotta be super, 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 super competitive on your own. I've had a number of recruited athletes. I've been told by an MIT coach, hey, you still have to get an 800 on your math section, and you still have to have a really high 700 range on your evidence-based reading and writing SAT score. So it just goes to show you that some schools are gonna be tougher than others. I would say that after the admission scandal broke, which did involve a lot of recruited athletes, I thought, or I've been seeing, I should say, that for some of the small liberal arts colleges, the highly selective small liberal arts colleges, those NESCAC conference colleges, so Williams and Amherst and Haverford's not NESCAC, but very similar, Hamilton and Bowdoin. What you'll see with those NESCAC schools or those elite small liberal arts colleges like a Haverford is they're being pretty tough on those recruited athletes. I would say even tougher than the Ivy League. And the Ivy League has a lot of strict rules associated with recruited athletes. But still, if you are not as strong as a non-recruited athlete, you tend to have a higher acceptance rate in the admissions process. That's still going on even after the admissions scandal. Next question, my daughter is shy but has been selected to be an editor of her school newspaper. That's awesome, and likes to write. And I'm curious how to reflect her strengths in the essay, even though she's not in the spotlight. Okay, so remember when I was talking about how you present yourself in the application matters just as much as what you actually do? For a student who isn't a big leader, they still can have tremendous impact in what they do. And so it's all about how she presents herself. So let's say she is an editor of the newspaper and she is is actually leading, in a quiet way and doing more than the editor-in-chief of the newspaper that year, she can get that across in her description in some very thoughtful, nuanced way. So it's all about how she presents herself. I would also say that, you don't have to be loud and outgoing and the center of attention and have the biggest leadership roles to be the most competitive. But you do have to have a really special soundbite. So soundbite is a concept I wrote an entire book on. Every single student that I work with, I really make sure that we are working off a very powerful and distinctive soundbite, because the truth is that no matter what kind of personality you have, no matter what kind of leadership roles you have, if you have a truly unique identity and you're able to project that in a soundbite, you're going to be able to project that in an application. So it's going to come down to her essay topics a lot of times and how she presents those activities and the impact that she has on those activities in her application. Next question. Hi, Sarah. What should we expect our college counselor would write or submit to colleges versus what the 2 teachers my daughter would ask to write her recommendations? Is it more of a school report that is submitted, or does the counselor also write additional information? And if so, what information is typically included in that submission? If it is more of a school report, then can we ask what it looks like? You absolutely can ask what it looks like. What I would recommend, though, is you can also do some research on your own. So when I am showing Application Nation families the actual forms that the counselor fills out, I look up, it's called, let me see if I can remember. I usually do an internet search and I find it easily. I look up Common App PDF application or something, PDF forms, and it will take you to a link of all the Common App forms. And it's true that not everybody's using the Common App, but those Common App forms are pretty universal. And by looking at them, you will get a sense of what the counselor needs to fill out and what the teachers fill out. The counselor's filling out more information. They fill out the school report, which provides information about the curriculum of the school and where the student falls within the class, for example. But they're also filling out the counselor form, and ideally, for any student applying to a selective college, almost always they're going to need a letter of recommendation, and that's attached to those forms that the counselor fills out. In that letter of recommendation, I've done workshops all over the country for faculty members, teachers, and counselors, and I explain to them the differences between the counselor letter of recommendation and the teacher's letters of recommendation. The best way that I can describe it is most admissions officers have a special order that they read the application in. Almost always they will review the high school transcript first and look at the test scores second. And then the first thing that they actually read is usually the letter of recommendation from the counselor of record. So the counselor of record really has this very powerful and influential role to really preface the entire rest of the application. And it's the job of the school counselor, if they do it right, to contextualize that student within their high school environment. It's not their job to mention their GPA or their class rank. That's already listed on the forms that they fill out. So any impressions they have about the student as an academic student, as a community member, any interactions that they've had, any background information about the student or their family or any unusual circumstances, any scheduling conflicts, that's the information that should be presented in that letter of recommendation from the counselor. But the truth is that most counselors of record have a huge caseload. They don't know the student really well. And so what ends up happening is the letter of recommendation written by the counselor of record could be positive but not completely helpful. That can happen a lot because of all of the students that most counselors are working with, even at private high schools, not just public high schools. So that puts, I think, even more pressure on the student to identify two core academic teachers who are going to write more detailed letters of recommendation. On that note, I think we've got to wrap up our Facebook Live. I hope that this has been helpful. You can see we had some questions from our Application Nation families. We had some really detailed questions. If you have a lot of questions, and most families do in the admissions process, I would just encourage you to check out Application Nation. That is my online private Facebook community, and you learn the ins and outs. You learn how to approach this process, not only as a student or parent, but how admissions officers view these applications. You learn about SOUNDBITE, you learn how to use it to your advantage. You learn about which essay topics to choose and which ones to avoid, how to put together a balanced college list. And if you want more interaction with me, I offer one-on-one sessions and mock interviews and college list reviews and all that good stuff. So I hope you will consider Application Nation. If not, you can check out my weekly blog every single week. I've got a new one coming out tomorrow, and a lot of free resources on saraharberson.com. So I hope you all have a great rest of your night, great rest of the school year, and I will see you back here again in June. Take care. Bye-bye.